I come from the Kon-Tiki Museum in Oslo, and what I'm going to tell you is a very simple story on how we developed a new exhibition and how we thought about getting to make a story with children. For those who know, this is the Kon-Tiki expedition. It was in 1947, just after the World War. Norwegian adventurer come scientist. He wanted to be a scientist. He had a theory about migration in the Pacific. People didn't want to accept it or read about it, so he built a balsa wood raft in Peru and sailed it 8,000 kilometers to Polynesia. And it got hugely successful, influenced a lot of popular culture in the 50s. The tiki bars, if you know, got hugely influenced by this. The documentary won an Oscar, the only Norwegian film to ever win an Oscar. Probably will be, I hope, because we have the Oscar in our museum. Well, anyway, this is the story. Reidar, being a scientist, he just wanted to take the raft, sail it across, and then he proved the point that the raft could sail that distance. He didn't want to do anything else with the raft, he wanted to leave it. One other guy said that you can't do this, you have to take it home, it's a fantastic story, you have to tell it. So he did it with the help of some ship owners. They built a museum, mostly on a voluntary basis. The whole raft was put together by former war heroes, friends of the Knut Haugland, the first museum director. The artist, Erik Hasselberg, that joined the expedition, made decorations. And still, with this simple museum, they had a lot of international visitors because the Norwegian government used the popularity of the story to show to state visits. Yeah. At the beginning, they was just thinking about having a temporary museum to raise money to pay for the expedition, because most of the money for the expedition was borrowed privately. Nobody believed that this would turn into a permanent museum, but it took only 6 years or 5 years before they had to build a new museum. And in the 6th year, it was ready. And this is the permanent museum building we have today. And as I say, by now we had had 17 million visitors, and for many years we were one of the most popular museums in Norway. Here is the display from more or less from the 50s to the 90s. Wall painting and telling the story with artifacts on the back side. The museum had or the exhibition had a big renovation in 2007, but still we didn't feel that it was very successful. And besides, last year we discovered that the rope on the raft was disintegrating. We had to rebuild it, and because of this, and because of a new movie released about this story, about the Kon-Tiki, we decided to upgrade the story. There were two things we were thinking about. One thing was how to tell the story. The second was we want to do something more for children, which is under prioritized area in our museum. The problem with the museum is that it was built in the 50s. It's a private institution. It doesn't get public funding. And so the exhibition area is kept a minimum. And the only area we have to work with for the exhibition is behind the raft and on the side of the raft. And it's more or less 2 meters walkways with flat, high walls. So that's, the basic for. The second, as I told you, is how to tell it. Reidar used it as an experiment. He wanted it in a scientific context about how ancient South Americans could have traveled across the sea. The second perspective, which was utilized in the new movie and which we choose, was more or less to tell the story about these 6 adventurers making this dangerous journey in the 40s. So a much more personalized story. And it ties very well into who's very engaged in the story. It's basically, even if you see today, basically boys 8 to 14 maybe, who's really engaged in the story. And today it's a lot of people from Eastern Europe. These pictures are from Eastern Europe. This is the main public relation pictures for the movie, and it's kind of our inspiration. First of all, you have this personalized story about Thor Heyerdahl, the organizer of the expedition. And then you have the visual concepts. Even for me, which had been reading this story as a child, it was a nice way to look when I saw the movie and saw the context of the raft, which was the main aesthetic of the movie, surrounded by 360 degrees of the horizon and sea, which is quite natural, but you don't really think that you can implement that in a museum exhibition. But that's what we decided to do quite generally. We built artwork, giving a sense of the ocean behind the raft, and we were telling the story on small boards along the wall. Since we only have this, it's about, from the floor up, it's about 2 meters, then you can decorate. What we ended up with was having the main story for the adults and the families from 1 meter up to 2 meters, and then we have left with the first meter above the floor for children, for doing something different, trying to telling something different. And we approached animation company making animation movies that we know, Quisten, to help us designing this part of the exhibition or the display. The main part for us was to pick a character that could kind of tell the story. We ended up with a small, cute little red crab. It's a pelagic crab. There are, of course, other candidates for this. There's a lot of animals in the Kon-Tiki story, but the main thing with the crab was that it can exist both under and below water. So it transcends the natural and not transcend, but it can interact in both worlds. And people may react to the shape of it. It's not a typical crab, but looks a bit more like a lobster. Here is the character. We had a storyteller developing a character of an old Peruvian senior who was, he had a big heart but also a big ego. And this is done because we want later to develop the whole story for children in a cartoon book. Well, there's the first idea. 2 things. We needed this to be things that he documented. And secondly, we wanted to show the kids that this was a real character. This was a pet crab that one of the crew was feeding every day when on steering duty. Yes. We made, the other consideration we did was that the first idea was to make a cartoon. Because of the height, 0 to 1 meter, you have small kids who can't really read. And we wanted to make a cartoon without words. The problem for us was that it would take too long time and be too expensive to develop at this stage. So we ended up with a story which we're telling in pictures and some words. And what we did was we connected the story of the children to the big story, especially in key areas. Here you have a story about a whale shark that visited the raft, which is told differently for the kids and for the adults. Here's the artwork, just to show. And here's the finished panel. We had high hopes. We opened the exhibition in June, and just after, one of the biggest newspapers in Norway reviewed the exhibitions of the museum. They do this every year. Quite a good idea. They do it the same as you review a restaurant or a theater play or something. There's some feedbacks from children, school children. So we had good hopes that the new exhibition and the things for children would give us good feedbacks from the newspaper. It turned out that they hadn't seen it. or that's what they wrote. I mean, 3-meter long fishes on the wall and they haven't seen it. We had a 7-meter long digital wall in the basement and a digital screen in the basement showing a new cartoon. They haven't seen it. So we couldn't rely on the feedback. I don't think they spent too much time in the museum for that review. But when you do go around to look at what visitors do, what we find is very good is that it engages different age groups of children. If you have a family, especially, the small kids would either pull their father to help them read and tell the story, or in some cases you see older siblings reading all the stories and explaining the story for the younger kids that can't read. So in that respect, it works very well when it's not too many people in the museum. On the backside for us so far is that we had too few tactile elements, so the kids can't touch and explore that too much themselves. And that was the whole story.